Let's see. Like there's, okay. Like this. Oh, perfect. Yes. Ooh. Oh, hey! You're back. Glad to see you this week. I'm so excited to share what I have this week for you. You know what? Everywhere I look in nature, I see God's fingerprints in his design. This is my microscope. And what I love about my microscope is I have all kinds of slides that I can look at just the smallest structures that God has designed, and even living creatures that you can't see with just your eyes. And so this microscope is one of my tools. But we have another tool, and that's up here. I'm Dr. C, and I'm glad you're back with me this week. And today, I want to teach you more about science. There is nothing that more excited me as a kid but to learn stuff about the world that is around us. So get ready. We're going to look again at God's marvelous design, and today we're going to pick our brains. This week's verse is Ephesians 6:18, and it says, "And pray on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the Lord's people." We're supposed to use our minds. People have asked, do I have a big brain? In fact, I do have a big brain. God has designed our brains with a great capacity to learn, read, understand, and question. Our mind, it can be a great tool. God has gifted us with his book, the Bible, and its instructions on how to live. Truth on how we can use our body and minds. Here are some mind-blowing facts. I have a model here of the brain, and you see that these little red lines represent the blood vessels that run through your brain. If you took all the blood vessels in your brain and put them end to end, they would measure 100,000 miles. That is from here on the earth to halfway to the moon. Did you know there is a scientific name for brain freeze? You know, on a hot day when you have a cold popsicle and you start to suck on that popsicle and suddenly you have this intense headache for a few seconds? That's a brain freeze. And the medical name for brain freeze is sphenopalatine ganglioneuralgia. Wow, try saying that 10 times. In the story Alice in Wonderland, there was an unfortunate character named the Mad Hatter. And he may indeed have been mad because he may have suffered from an ailment that inflicted many of the designers in the hat industry back in those days. In the 19th century, people who made hats frequently displayed neurological problems, which are problems with their brains, because they had something called mercury poisoning. We know today that mercury is really toxic for our bodies, but mercury and nitrates were sprayed onto the felt, and the hatter would manipulate the material to soften it, and it helped the hat to be shiny. These unknown hat makers experienced symptoms such as difficulty in thinking. Whoops, I might have a little bit of that mercury poisoning right now. But anyway, they had difficulty in thinking and twitchy hands, which led to the expression mad as a hatter. You may have noticed I have a few models here in front of me. There is a skull missing its jawbone, a full brain, and then we have a head that has one half of the brain showing and the rest has the skin shown. I want to talk about each of these models. First off, with the skull is the container that our brain is stored in, and it's pretty hard. So this keeps that soft, spongy material that we call our brain safe. So it is a container that keeps it. And this container is specially designed. We have our frontal bone, which actually protrudes further out than our eyeballs. So, you know, if you fall down on your face, you don't usually scrape your eyeballs. And our skull is really good about protecting us with that. So that would be really unpleasant. And then our brain actually has two hemispheres. We have a right side and a left side. So you can see this little space in between, lying between the two hemispheres. So sometimes we call it the right and left brain. Our brains are very closely packed into our skull. So you can see the brain here. And if you can move in real closely, you can actually see the skin, and the brain is right up to the skull. You know, being the sister with 4 older brothers, sometimes they would call me a fathead. I know, it's horrible, right? But I know, using my incredible medical knowledge, that could never be true, because there is such little space between your brain and the skull that is why it's so important to wear a helmet, especially when you're out riding your bike, because that will protect this precious organ, the brain. Now, one of the other models I wanted to show you, let's go back to our big brain over here. Not only does the brain have different areas and parts of the brain, regions that we call, but each of the regions have functional uses. So for example, this little orange space right here is called the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is really important in our personality and decision making. For you guys who have older brothers and sisters who may be teenagers, this part's not really developed yet. It usually takes into your 20s before your frontal lobe is fully developed to make those wonderful, wise decisions. Then we have this part of your brain called the temporal lobe. So your temporal lobe is the area where your verbal, that's your talking, and your auditory, hearing, is processed. So that's where the part of the brain that helps you to do that. This part of the brain is called your parietal brain. So a lot of functions and movement and things occur in that area. And the last part, which is most interesting and kind of curious, you know, when I get up to heaven, I'm going to have to ask God this question. But this area is called the occipital area. And the occipital area is your visual cortex. That is where you see. That doesn't make any sense, does it? It's in the back of your brain. So if this is the front and this is the back, your occipital cortex is actually in the back of your brain. So there's old cartoons you might have seen, like Tweety Bird and all those things. Have you ever seen those old cartoons? But sometimes they would get hit in the head and they would see, what? Yeah, stars. It's not uncommon sometimes when people even have an issue, like say you're running and you slip and you fall, hit the back of your head. Sometimes people actually do see bright lights and stars. And that's because the occipital cortex is actually being stimulated. Welcome to my laboratory. I'm sorry, I don't know what comes over me sometimes. We're here in my laboratory with the dude. Hey dude, can you say hi to everybody? Oh dude, okay, maybe you can walk this off sometime. We'll put this down. Sorry. Dude has decided to be here to tell you a few things. What's that? Oh, yeah, I remember you telling me about that. He would like to be my model and show a few things about the brain and its connections. No, I'm not going to rip off your other arm. It's okay. I'm sorry about that. So the dude wants to show you that right here, this is a complete skeleton that the dude is modeling, and our brain is right in our skull. And that brain communicates to our spinal cord. That spinal cord is housed in our vertebral column. And these vertebral column look like almost like shark scales, like a shark fin. And these protect the delicate spinal cord that runs down our vertebral column. And you can see at each of the levels, at each of the vertebrae, there is actually a little yellow cord that comes out of there. So there are nerve roots that run out in each of the levels that give sensation and the ability for the body to move. Thanks, dude, for coming out and showing people a little bit about yourself. Yeah, I'll be careful next time. You know, I am a doctor. I know how to take care of these things. In our discussion of the brain, I would be negligent if I didn't show you the greatest model of all. Okay, it's not a model at all. It's actually a real brain. So cool. Okay, because I love gross stuff. So anytime I do gross things, I have to always put my gloves on. Got my other one. Make sure I get that on nice. So in this box, I have actually 2 brains fit in here. And the brain I have here is right there. Isn't that cool? This is actually a real brain. This is something that God has designed. This is a brain of a sheep. Looks pretty small to me, doesn't it? Sheep are pretty big animals. Who in the Bible is described as a sheep? Yep, it's us. And it's funny because sheep are probably not the smartest animals out there, and because they got little bitty brains. And sometimes we're not real wise either, especially when we're not following our Heavenly Father and listening to His voice. And so in the Bible, it talks about the sheep know His voice. And certainly, as we walk and read the Bible, we learn more and more to recognize God's voice. So now it's time to talk about our at-home activity this week. This one's really simple. I hope your snot came out to a glorious slimy mess. But this week, this one your parents might like a little better. All you need is a tube. Yeah, that's it. I have a tube right here. Now you could use a tube for a paper towel holder or a toilet paper holder. This is a plastic tube that I got at the grocery store. In the produce section, they have those little baggies that are wrapped around these little tubes. And I find that they're very useful to use for this test. So for this activity, this is all that you need. And what we're going to talk about is how your eyes and your brain actually communicate together. Now, your eyes don't make any decisions. They're called receptors. They actually receive the information, and from your eyes, the image is sent to your, where? Yep, you remembered, your occipital cortex. So in the back of your head, that message gets sent. Now, your eyes can get fooled very easy. And this is an experiment that is going to help you to see how your eyes can be fooled. But before I show you this, take a look at this picture behind me. This is a picture by N.C. Escher. He was a turn-of-the-century graphic designer, and his pictures were fantastic that he sketched, because the uniqueness about his pictures is they always defy the eyes. So if you look at this poster, and you look down one stairs, you see one guy is walking up and one guy is walking down. And as your eyes trace along the staircases, you will see, wow, that just doesn't make sense. So your brain knows that something is off, but your eyes are sending the image that your brain just cannot break apart. So I'm going to do another thing. So today's activity, this week's activity, is you're going to take a tube. Now your eyes have 2 visual fields. So you have your right eye and your left eye. And images come in your right eye and images come in your left eye. So when those images come in, your brain actually takes those 2 images and fuses it on top of each other to make sense of it. So how you do this activity to see how your brain works is you will take a tube you'll put the tube up to your left eye and keep that left eye open. And that left eye will look straight through the tube. And then my right eye stays open too. A lot of times people try to close one eye when they do it. It's really important to keep both eyes open. So one eye's looking through the tube, the other eye is looking straight forward. Then I take my right hand and I place my right hand right up to the tube about midway. Do you see that? So my left eye is looking through the tube and my right eye is looking at my hand. I'm not going to give it away. What do you see? If you have a good joke, I'd love to hear it. Maybe add it to the comments below. Okay, here goes. What does a brain do when it sees a friend across the street? It gives it a brainwave. Why didn't a brain want to take a bath? It didn't want to get brainwashed. Why was the neuron sent to the principal's office? It had trouble controlling its impulses. Well, I think that concludes our time this week, but I wanted to leave you with a final question. How does reading the Bible renew our minds? Your brain is a marvelous thing. Until next week, continue to magnify the wonder.